Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is John and I have the great pleasure of being here with Michael Minkler. He's the general manager of CCWD. So our half hour now is going to be water, water, water. And but overall, it's a subject that needs to be near and dear to all of us. So thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've been general manager for what, 18 months now or so?
Yeah, I was general manager at Utica Water and Power Authority before that, but at Calaveras County Water District for 18 months now.
Yeah, we were talking a little before the camera started rolling. I think yours is kind of one of those fun move to a small town type of story. Tell us a little bit on your background and how you ended up here.
Sure, it has been a fun ride. My wife and I were working at the same law firm together. I was in Sacramento. She was in LA at the time. Through a friend of a friend, we found out about a law office in Arnold that was closing up. Mike and Ellen Boat and Mike Millward, who I'm sure many of your viewers remember. They were moving out of their office. We were looking for a place where we could move together and start a family, and so we came up here and met with them, and it all kind of fell into place, and it's just been fantastic since then. So
very nice, very cool. Now you have 2 kids now. You have 2 young.
Yeah, 2 boys, Elliot and Julian, 2 years old, 2.5 and 5.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, CCWD stuff. What do you think is for water and stuff? What's the top issues for you right now?
Yeah, it's with so much going on, it's hard to know where to start. I mean, the most immediate issue this week has been the most recent PSPS event. It's a challenge to run a water district. The CCWD is a challenge, no matter, even under the best circumstances. And doing it without power is just adds another layer of complexity. I just can't say enough about the work that our crews do, the logistics that are involved in keeping everything running, keeping the backup generators operating, keeping them fueled up. It is a monumental effort, and they just do a phenomenal job. So our guys, led by Damon Wyckoff, our operations manager, they put a tremendous amount of work into being prepared in advance, and then when the events happen, they're all hands on deck, keep everything running, and it's just the fact that most of our customers don't notice when the power's out as far as the water goes is a testament to the work that they do.
Very cool.
On that note, I will try to take the opportunity to remind people when the power is out, and regardless of the reason, please conserve water.
Right.
It takes a lot of pressure off of the system.
A dumb question. Let's say when power's out before backup generator, how much of a buffer is it? I mean, how many hours before, as far as tank stuff before, let's say. Yeah, I mean, how much of a buffer do you have?
Yeah, it really depends on where you are in the county. So we have 6 different drinking water systems that are completely isolated from each other.
Got it.
So the Evans Pass system is our biggest, from Big Trees Village in Dorrington all the way down to past, below, basically Bryce Station Vineyards. And then we've got Copperopolis, Valley Springs, West Point, and then 2 small systems, Sheep Ranch and Wallace. And so it'll depend on where you are. One thing that our crews do in advance, when we do have advance notice of the power outage, is they'll top off those tanks. That if we do have an issue where a backup generator fails, we've bought ourselves as much time as possible.
Yeah, because I guess in some areas, elevation's more of your friend than others, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges of a water system in the area, the topography that we have, going from almost to the valley floor at Wallace all the way up to 5,000 or 6,000 feet. It creates a lot of interesting pressure zones and challenges to operate the system.
I know in this last one, I didn't notice at our house at Arnold at all. Wonderful stuff. It was just,
great.
In fact, I could tell they were doing service on the generator once. It was interesting because, you keep waiting for the power to come back on. PG&E had done the all clear, then I heard your generator go off. I'm like, okay, all right, maybe it's like, oh, they're just fueling it up or doing, somebody must have just been doing the maintenance cycle on it or whatever.
Our goal absolutely is.
I was like, oh, great, it came back on 5 minutes later. I was like, oh, man.
Yeah, the goal absolutely is uninterrupted water and wastewater service, even during those outages. But we have had incidents where the generators fail. And last year particularly scary incident, frankly, down in Copperopolis when the generator for the treatment plant failed, and that was a situation where we were down to about 24 hours of stored treated water before the community was going to run out of treated water. And the real scary scenario was if there actually was a fire, and that fortunately it was just a PSPS event, no actual fire. But if the fire trucks are drawing those water tanks down, it's not going to last 24 hours. So that was really when we knocked on every door and called everyone we could think of to call, and fortunately we were able to get a generator, because that one's a 600 kilowatt generator. So that's big something beast that has to come up on
it's on its own wheels.
It's on the back of a big rig to get here, and there are not very many of them. So, but fortunately we were able to get it back online in time. But it really drove home the vulnerable situation that our communities are in if those backup generators fail.
Right. Now, this kind of segues into something we talked about a little bit. Now, your background as a training is an attorney, and I know that the regulatory burden that water districts fall under is pretty immense. Especially ones that do on the waste side, the treatment. And I guess the question segues into like those the PSPS or power outage events is, on the regulatory burden, as bad as the some of the onus on you as far as clean drinking water. On the other one, as far as for effluent spills and that, as far as regulatory stuff, is the hammer almost bigger on the wastewater side, or how does it balance out?
Yeah, I think it is a little bigger on the wastewater side, or a little bit more immediate, I guess.
Yeah.
Obviously on the drinking water side, it's a little bit more of an immediate public health concern.
You get a boil water notice, or
so that's obviously our top priority. So you really don't want to run afoul of those regulations.
I probably phrased that wrong. I didn't mean it, but I meant that. It's liability downside.
Absolutely.
I guess you have your boil water notice. Obviously, you want your clean. But as far as the liability hammers, almost worse on the wastewater side.
It can be significant.
Okay.
And there's a lot of uncertainty there too. It'll depend on the circumstances of whatever has gone wrong. If there's the unfortunate situation where there's a wastewater spill, a lot of times if it's something, the most immediate, probably the most common instance I can think of is we're limited. We have a lot of spray fields where we'll dispose of the treated effluent from a wastewater plant, and there's limitations on when we can operate those spray fields. We're not supposed to do it when it's raining, for example, so we want to contain the runoff. But that's an event that can occur when we're up against our capacity. We need to discharge, and the water board tends to be pretty, I wouldn't say forgiving is probably not the right word. I don't want to put them, get them in trouble. But as long as we're giving them notice, we're doing everything we can to contain the situation. There's no real threat to public health or the environment. Then the penalties are going to be pretty small. But if it's a situation where we've neglected to maintain a piece of equipment, or we've done something that we shouldn't have done, and it led to a discharge of wastewater into a creek or something along those lines, then there's going to be
punitive, right?
Yeah, there's going to be penalties along with that. So.
That's where one of the things we were talking about is, do you think for municipal agencies such as yourself now, do you think it benefits to have a to have a legal background, or
You know, when it comes to water and wastewater regulations, it's actually really our operators that are the ones that are the most qualified.
Right.
They you know, the certifications that they have to get, they've got to be experts in that stuff to get those certifications. So they're the ones when it comes to complying with the water and wastewater treatment guidelines. They're the experts.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other regulatory burdens that we have to deal with where it does come in handy to have a legal background, just even in terms of contract management, for example, dealing with contractors, but a lot of new legislative mandates, regulatory mandates. That's where it really comes in handy, and also just you know, we spend a lot of time and energy trying to bring in resources to fund infrastructure projects from outside of the area, and navigating the regulatory and the legislative process. Having some of that back in my background has been really helpful.
So as far as some of the grant writing stuff, is that a hands-on thing for you? Are you immersed in some of that stuff?
Less on the grant writing,
okay.
and we've been fortunately really successful lately, bringing in a lot of grants. But that is largely more the other department heads. Our engineer, district engineer Charles Palmer, has a lot to do with that. Damon, I already mentioned. Joel Metzger, who used to be with CCWD since took my old job at Utica. He was a big part of that. Rebecca Callan, our new director of administrative services. It's really, grants are a team effort.
Right.
But we're, you know, an example of working through the legislative process. We're really trying to bring in some outside resources to upgrade our wastewater treatment plant in Copperopolis.
Got it.
Up against our capacity down there. We have had some notices of violations for discharges down there in the past. We really need to upgrade that plant.
Because that one is a pump. You know, is it pumping issues, or what was it? Wasn't that a?
It's just a capacity issue.
It's just a capacity issue for that.
And but it's, you know, it's an extremely expensive project, and we have, on the wastewater side especially, it's a challenge to fund expensive infrastructure projects just because of the small number of ratepayers that we have.
Right.
You know, on the water side, I think we're around 13,200 customers. On the wastewater side, though, only about 5,000. And so to fund, you know, projects that are $10-15 million infrastructure projects on the backs of a very small ratepayer base, it's incredibly challenging.
You got a lot of miles of pipe for
those
small
treatment plants
ratepayer.
in particular. So we that's where the grants, you know, the success that our team has had in bringing grants in is just critical. But we're also working through with our federal legislators, trying to bring in some money through the Army Corps of Engineers to help us with that upgrade for that treatment plant. And that effort is where I'll spend much more of my time and energy on trying to bring in, through the legislative process, bring in some resources from the outside.
Because that's one project that could sink the entire, I mean, that's a big enough project. It sinks out the whole budget, right?
We have to find ways to bring in outside resources for those projects, and so whether it's grants, you know, if we're not able to find grants or some sort of assistance legislatively, then it's going to have to be financing. And then that ultimately falls on the, you know, that burden falls on the ratepayers. So we try to minimize that to the extent we can, and all of these things really are a team effort.
Yeah. Last one on some of the grant stuff. We just saw the release in a few weeks ago from FEMA on the, what was it, the $3 million or something like that for the. Now, is that project, is it just about done, or is it? I mean, I know you've been replacing those tanks. You haven't started replacing any of those tanks
yet. That's the Redwood
tank
grant replacement project.
Yeah.
And just to save you from the influx of phone calls you're about to get, we can't give the wood away. It's the first question we always get, because the redwood from those tanks is just beautiful.
Old growth stuff.
It's phenomenal. So we can't give it away, but we will try to make it available locally to folks. And yeah, that's a critical project. That is an example of, you know, that's $3 million that we don't have to draw from ratepayers to replace those tanks. And the tanks they're past end of life. They're in severe fire threat areas. They really need to be replaced. So yeah, that was a very successful grant.
We heard some, and maybe our numbers that we heard, but some of those are huge. I mean, what's some of the gallons and what's some of the gallons of storage and
hundreds of thousands.
Yeah,
of gallons.
that's what. Yeah,
and I don't know what the largest of our redwood tanks is, but we have steel tanks that are 1 million gallons.
Okay.
And yeah, so they're big tanks, and they're not easy to replace. So I think that's 5 different tanks. It's $3 million project.
Yeah.
We should be in construction next summer. I would expect. We got a $5 million grant for consolidating the wastewater treatment plants up in West Point, Wilseyville, and that's a 100% grant funded project. And that's another example of, as I already explained, the difficulty of funding those projects on the wastewater side. Bringing in a project like that's 100% grant funded is it's just huge. Our grants team is just phenomenal. We've got a second grant up in West Point recently for a second water treatment filter. The water treatment plant up there is in good shape. It's fine, but we only have 1 filter. So we never take it offline to do maintenance. And if it ever fails, we don't have a backup. So adding a second water treatment filter there is a high priority.
Yeah.
So we brought in a $500,000 grant from Department of Water Resources. We'll have to. That's a minimum 50% match on our side, but it's a big, really helps get the project done.
Yeah.
So those are just some of the recent successes of bringing in those outside resources to fund these projects.
Very nice stuff. One that wanted to segue back to the regulatory environment a little bit. I think it seems to have calmed down the last couple of years, but it seemed that for a few years there, from Sacramento and stuff, is the pressure on really small water departments was excessive. And it seemed like there was going to be an economies of scale to where CCWD, your size district and stuff, was going to be almost like the smallest ones to survive. Do you see that is backed off a little bit, or is it, you know what I mean? Because it's, the Pac-Man of you, they'll give a small agency to you guys just because there's no way that they can handle just the overhead just to do it.
I don't think that the state has backed off of that. They're really pushing what they call consolidation or regionalization. Right. Finding ways to, even if it's not necessarily a consolidation, but interconnect water systems so that we have some redundancy and we have just a better way to provide service to the community. Got it. The state hasn't backed off on that. They do put out a lot of incentives for those for that type of work, but it's got to be a case by case analysis.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't mean to come into something from left field. It just seemed.
Oh no, that's okay. This is a topic we discuss a lot actually, and it really because there's small agencies out there that are doing great. And they don't need to be consolidated, or they're doing just fine on their own.
The wheels turn and just let it turn and do it.
Managing just fine. So and then there's others that really need help. The ones that the state is really after are the ones that have really failed to provide quality drinking water on a consistent basis, and those tend to be really small water districts that just can't provide clean drinking water for their communities, and we don't really have any agencies that are that level of failure in Cal Ferris County. We all water agencies deal with
it's not like
aging infrastructure and challenges.
Bob forgot to change the filter type of thing.
So those are the ones where if you got a water agency that is consistently failing. For various reasons, it may not be necessarily even their fault. It may be the source of water that they're drawing from, and they just don't have the technology or the capability to properly treat it. Those are the ones the state is really focused on consolidating into larger agencies to bring more resources to address those issues.
Yeah. One of the things that's always been a nice thing is to get a job at CCWD has always been one of those things to where it's a good thing. To get a job, that's one of the best jobs in the counties to have. Is how is the state of employment, crew, and that side of it? Is it?
Yeah, I can personally say it is a great place to work. I'm glad to hear that that's the reputation that's out there. I mean, we've got phenomenal people at CCWD, and we've got a lot of people that have been there for a long time. You know, we have a lot of 15, 20, even 30-plus year veterans at CCWD that are just, you know, kind of the heart and soul and the core of the organization. Yeah. And then we've also had a lot of turnover, and especially on the management team. There's 9 of us that are considered managers, and only 3 that have been at CCWD for more than 2 years. So just a tremendous amount of turnover on the management team.
Are you seeing a lot more tech innovation as far as monitor? I mean, is that for some of the? I mean, all it seems like it's becoming very technical, right? As far as as far as monitoring stuff, communication stuff, is that?
Yeah, on all sides. Both, I mean, operationally,
sure.
with the SCADA technology that we utilize is pretty high tech stuff. But also within the office, the business practices, that's something that we've taken a very careful look at. And I think one of the advantages to having a new management team come in is taking a fresh look at things and going, yeah, well, it was, these things are working, but these are things that we could do better, or that we've done differently in other agencies, or something along those lines. We've done some restructuring of the organization. We're bringing in a lot of new technology. I know I mentioned Rebecca Callan earlier. She's really spearheading an effort to do a review of all of our business processes and identify new technologies so that we can do things more efficiently. Right. Ultimately, provide better customer service. Right. That's always the goal. Yeah. And to keep costs down as much as we can, without, because we're growing. Mm-hmm. CCWD is actually smaller as far as the number of employees that we have than it was 10 years ago. And over that period of time, we've absorbed other water
sure.
systems, and we've
yep.
grown as
yep.
far as our infrastructure goes. The regulatory burdens mm-hmm. have increased over that period mm-hmm. of time. So the amount of work the district does has increased over that period of time, and we have fewer employees. And so yeah. we want to try to continue to be as efficient as we possibly can, and that's really a big effort that we have right now.
Question, with the churn in real estate and with the COVID stuff this year and everything else, are you seeing, because you have a lot of homes now that may have been occupied 1 or 2 weekends a yeah. month, now they're full-time occupancy and stuff, like, is it going to change some of your water usage patterns and everything else? Are you seeing some showing up on your numbers?
Already have
okay.
seen that, yeah.
Okay.
Quite a bit. It's been pretty shocking. I think, going into the shelter in place and the stay-at-home orders, we really didn't know what to expect. Right. We put some projects on hold. We put some things on hold because mm-hmm. there was just a lot of uncertainty about how it was going to impact our revenue. What was going to happen. And what we've seen is, as you said, the influx of people into Calaveras County. There's been higher turnover yeah. At a faster rate of real estate. There's been an increase in new connection applications for new construction projects, and
which is good. That helps.
It's great. Yeah,
yeah.
It's good. I think that's good for everybody.
Yeah.
But also, probably most significant is the increase in full-time occupancy rates. Houses that were typically vacation homes or rentals right. are being occupied on a full-time basis now. So we really have seen an increase in water consumption, especially in the Ebbets Pass service area.
It's been a measurable thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think a good example of that, we have a very close working relationship with the Blue Lake Springs Mutual Water Company, where they get about half of their water supply from CCWD right. through a wholesale water agreement. And we recently had to work out an amendment or a different way of applying that contract because of the steep increase of water consumption that they've seen. And that's yeah. a community I'm familiar with. I used to work with them before yeah. I was at CCWD. And this, if I remember correctly, I think they had figured out at one point somewhere along the lines of 15% of the homes in Blue Lake Springs were full-time occupancy. And that number, I don't know what it is now, but it's certainly higher than 15%. Yeah. And so they've seen their water demand go up significantly. I would say maybe even double.
Yeah. And it's just as a personal, as I know my neighbor in Arnold, young families, they bought a second home, they have 3 kids under 10, it was going to be their weekend deal or whatever. They're going to move up here. And so they're putting 3 kids into the school districts when the school districts, but even that stuff evens out, but that's the plan. So instead of a house that's occupied 1 weekend a month, maybe, it's going full-time with 3 kids. So
yeah, and we've seen a lot of that, and there still is, I think, some uncertainty about is that permanent?
Right.
Is that a new normal for this area, or are we going to see people move back down to the urban areas?
My gut is, I think, is a little bit of overreaction. Now we're into the part of fire season, and a lot of these people are like, well, maybe COVID's better than fire. I think we're going to see a balance.
They haven't had to shovel a lot of snow yet.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a little bit of a balance out.
Yeah.
But
I think you're right. It'll be somewhere. It may contract a little bit.
Yeah.
But probably not back to where it was before. And I think we've heard from a lot of the big employers in the Bay Area. A lot of the major tech companies are saying that employees don't have to come back. Right. They can work remotely forever if they want. And so people really have that flexibility. Rents are going down in San Francisco and they're going up in Calaveras County, which if anybody had suggested that was going to happen before COVID.
Right. Well, this is way out of left field. This goes back into your legal stuff. Is now we're starting to see the wave of lawsuits from employee groups that say you can't force us to come back.
Right.
So I think that's going to be, not only the company saying, now you're going to see some pushback in some of the employee groups to where like, no, you can't make us come back. Right. And I think that's going to be that'll be interesting.
It has, there's all sorts of interesting, I'm sure there's a whole niche market of lawyers that are going to make a career out of COVID. But along those lines for CCWD, our staff has really just been incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
And just having to adapt back in March when it really hit, like all employers, we had to really change how we operate in a very short period of time.
And the unknown, you don't know what you don't know. I think we got a couple minutes left, so kind of tie that up into in that, and maybe what some of the futures, where we CCW looks placed for near future stuff.
Yeah, we have hopefully things start to get back to normal here again before too long, whatever normal is.
Yeah, whatever the new normal is.
Right. We have a lot more construction planned. We're wrapping up some really significant construction projects right now. We have some public outreach that the Reach One project on Highway 4.
Yeah.
A lot of people are familiar with.
You had to cancel the Zoom. That's
we're rescheduling that one because it's hopefully only a couple months from completion, but the next couple months are a pretty critical period of time. There are going to be some. We're going to have to shut down as we cut over to the new infrastructure. So we really we're going to be doing a big public outreach effort there, and so we've got, as we discussed already, a lot of big construction projects in the pipeline for next year as well. We've got a really important strategic planning process that we're about to undertake. As I mentioned, the new management team, some restructuring of the organization.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really just a perfect time to go into a strategic planning process, develop a new strategic plan. We haven't had one in quite some time. So really try to gel all the different things that are going on at CCWD. So I'm really excited about it. I imagine that sounds very nerdy to say you're very excited about your strategic planning development process,
it's
but
pretty good.
I think it's a really exciting time at CCWD. So
very nice.
Very much looking forward to that.
One thing on the construction stuff on we didn't touch on the Reach 3, which I think it's how well you guys have managed it this time, because traffic flows and everything have been to where it's hasn't been an issue.
Yeah, our operations and engineering staff have just been phenomenal in how they have kept that project moving forward.
Yeah.
The contractors that are implementing the project have also been great. We've heard nothing but positive feedback about traffic control, which is not something we typically get positive feedback about. So no, it's been Mazingo has done a great job on that project.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you for the time you spent with us. We appreciate it. And I know it's one of the 2 or 3, I guess, the most impactful jobs in the county. You know, because it's people's water, and it's thank you for what you do.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you having me.
You got it.